A uniform is supposed to represent honor and integrity, but some people hide behind a badge for their own twisted reasons. In the beating heart of Philadelphia, where busy streets thrum with restless energy, a single act of discrimination sets off an unstoppable chain reaction. A jaded cop, fueled by prejudice, hatches a scheme to humiliate an unsuspecting black woman, unaware she's about to become his new superior. Secrets unravel, alliances form, and tensions escalate to breaking point. In this city of brotherly love, the bitter truth will surface. Sometimes the greatest danger comes from the very people sworn to protect. Philadelphia is a complex city, a place of pride and history, a city once home to statesmen like Benjamin Franklin and the iconic Liberty Bell, but also haunted by modern-day challenges. The Philadelphia Police Department, with its sprawling network of precincts and diverse ranks, stands as a mirror to the city. Sometimes that mirror reflects compassion, at other times deep-seated flaws. This story unfolds in the 8th District, a precinct located near the Delaware River. Polished floors, gleaming badges, and the echoes of footsteps mark the daily hustle there, each cop burdened with the city's ghosts, each striving to uphold the law in their own way. Among these officers, Officer Bradley Kincaid was known for his sharp uniform, a rigid spine, and a brittle personality. Standing around 6 feet tall with a thin, angular face, Kincaid was the type of cop who took pride in the authority vested in him. But behind his well-practiced smile lurked a dangerous prejudice he'd long kept hidden beneath the veneer of polite conversation. Bradley hailed from a family with a lengthy tradition in law enforcement. His father had served under the Philadelphia Police Department decades earlier, leaving behind a legacy both lauded and questioned. The older Kincaid was rumored to have used his badge to control the community rather than serve it. Whispers of corruption had haunted him, but never quite enough evidence had surfaced to unseat him. This paternal influence seeped into Bradley's worldviews, shaping the way he navigated the streets, how he interacted with suspects, and most importantly, how he treated black citizens. Despite these flaws, Kincaid was careful to craft a reputation as a by-the-books cop. In public, he displayed courtesy and composure, praising minority officers who displayed outstanding service. Yet, privately, he clung to archaic prejudices and yearned for any opportunity to show that certain communities, especially black neighborhoods, were inherently prone to crime. He was never overtly racist in official channels. He had learned to hide it too well. Instead, it dripped out in subtle actions: the extra traffic stop, the sneer while speaking, the readiness to believe the worst before giving the benefit of the doubt. On the other side of the city's policing spectrum was Lieutenant Ebony Warner. Born and raised in West Philadelphia, Ebony had experienced the entire gamut of life there: the family gatherings in row houses filled with love, the street corner violence that touched too many young lives, and the enduring neighborly bonds that transcended economic hardships. From the moment she decided to join the police academy, Ebony knew she faced an uphill battle. First, she was a woman in a male-dominated world. Second, she was black, a fact that some would either see as an asset or an obstacle, depending on their mindset. Through iron determination and a genuine desire to foster trust in the community, Ebony steadily rose through the ranks, making sergeant in record time. Over the past year, she had served as lieutenant in a different precinct, earning a solid reputation for fairness and dedication. Unbeknownst to many, Ebony was now being considered for captaincy. This was not mere speculation. The city's top brass saw her as a rising star, someone capable of bridging the gap between the community and the police. The final assignment to confirm her readiness would be a transfer to the 8th District, which had been dealing with a spike in racial complaints. She was tasked secretly, as part of her audition for the captain's role, with evaluating that precinct's culture, identifying problem officers, and proposing reforms that could usher in a new era of policing. No one, not even Ebony, suspected the magnitude of friction that would spark upon her arrival. The day Ebony Warner stepped into the 8th District's briefing room was unusually humid for mid-April. The tall windows overlooked the busy street outside, and thick sunlight poured into the open space. Cops milled about, flipping through schedules, exchanging snide remarks, or sipping tepid coffee. Some recognized Ebony from departmental bulletins announcing her transfer. Others only saw a new face in uniform. Officer Bradley Kincaid noticed her right away. He had read her name before. He prided himself on scanning the internal memos and new rosters. He let his gaze linger just a moment too long as Ebony exchanged pleasantries with the station's admin staff. His eyes narrowed when she turned to look at him, that half-doubt flickering in his mind. Another female officer trying to climb the ladder? The color of her skin only added fuel to his unspoken biases. Ebony's posture was measured, but not stiff. She offered a warm smile and introduced herself to the officers she passed. She had a knack for reading body language, and she could sense the varying reactions. Some welcomed her with curiosity and open arms. Others, like Officer Kincaid, responded with chilly politeness. One of the station's sergeants, a tall, gregarious man named Sergeant Andrew Lopez, introduced Ebony to the rest. "Everyone, this is Lieutenant Ebony Warner, our newest addition. She'll be overseeing some new community outreach initiatives. Make sure to help her get oriented." A few polite handshakes and nods later, Ebony was shown her office, a modest room with pale walls and minimal decor. She placed a single framed photo on her desk. Her father, now deceased, who had been a sanitation worker and her personal hero. As she surveyed the new space, Ebony felt a swirl of emotions, anticipation, a hint of nerves, and a burning desire to make a difference. She had faced bigger challenges, but something about Kincaid's stare and the tension in the precinct's corridors hinted there was more to come. That evening, Ebony joined a routine patrol ride along with a younger officer named Officer Samantha Briggs, a rookie who was eager to learn. Samantha was bright-eyed, evidently excited to have a strong role model like Ebony in the car. As they cruised along the industrial edges of the Delaware River, Ebony asked her about the precinct's morale and culture. Samantha hesitated. "I only arrived 6 months ago. I've heard stories, but I haven't been involved in anything questionable personally. I try to keep my head down, do my job." "Stories?" Ebony prodded gently. Samantha let out a breath. "We have a few older officers who've been here too long, if you get my drift. Some are set in their ways. They give a hard time to certain communities. And then there's Officer Bradley Kincaid. I guess you could say he's a stickler for the rules. But I can't shake the feeling that he treats minorities differently. It's subtle though, so I don't have any direct complaints to share. Still, the vibe is strong." Ebony's intuition sharpened. She probed further, wanting specifics, but Samantha clammed up. The young officer was clearly afraid of speaking out of turn. Rookies who crossed senior officers often faced retribution in the form of undesirable shifts or no backup during tense calls. Ebony made a mental note to watch Kincaid carefully. If there was truth to the rumors, it was her responsibility to confront it. After all, she wasn't just any new lieutenant. She was under direct instructions from higher-ups to weed out discriminatory practices. That night, Ebony and Samantha responded to a call about a disturbance in a predominantly black neighborhood. It turned out to be a false alarm, a nosy neighbor complaining about a family reunion party. Despite the anticlimax, Ebony watched how swiftly Samantha tried to diffuse tensions, politely explaining to the complaining neighbor that nothing illegal was happening. Ebony then spoke with the family and assured them everything was fine, wincing internally at how easily a scenario like this could escalate under the wrong officer's watch. Back at the precinct, Ebony found herself the last person left in the locker room. She changed out of her uniform, her muscles aching. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered. As she closed her locker, she caught a glimpse of Officer Kincaid leaning on a doorframe across the hallway. He offered her a tight-lipped nod. She nodded back, her mind swirling with questions she was determined to answer. 3 weeks passed in relative calm. Ebony steadily gained trust from some of the rank and file. She launched a small-scale community outreach program involving after-school visits to local youth centers and meet and greets with local shop owners. It wasn't radical, but it was a start just enough to signal to the community that change might be on the horizon. During this time, Ebony kept a discreet eye on Officer Kincaid. Day by day, her suspicions deepened. Though Kincaid was polite on the surface, Ebony noticed how he casually volunteered for calls in minority neighborhoods, how he always returned with more arrests than any other officer. She started analyzing his body cam footage whenever possible. The footage often revealed Kincaid making small remarks that put people on edge. He'd say things like, "You people always try to talk your way out, or bet you learned that on the street corner." Those phrases were borderline enough for Ebony to suspect prejudice, but not damning enough for formal discipline. Kincaid was careful. One afternoon, Ebony heard an argument echo from the hallway near the briefing room. Stepping out of her office, she saw Kincaid wagging a finger at a younger black officer, Officer Jordan Hill. She caught only fragments of the tense conversation. "Point do your job right next time," Kincaid barked. Hill, eyes flashing with barely contained anger, replied, "With all due respect, you're not my supervisor, Kincaid. I reported everything by the book. Don't twist it." Kincaid shot him a hard glare. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm expecting accountability." He paused, his voice dropping lower but audible enough for Ebony. "I know what really goes on in your old neighborhood, Hill." That single line was loaded with innuendo. Ebony coughed loudly to announce her presence. Kincaid immediately stepped back, forcing a polite smile. "Ah, Lieutenant Warner. Didn't see you there," he said, adopting a tone that was downright amiable. Officer Hill's tense stance remained until Ebony gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Everything okay here?" Hill nodded, lips pursed. "We're good, Lieutenant," Kincaid chimed in. "Just a misunderstanding about some paperwork. We cleared it up." Ebony stared at Kincaid for a moment, then turned to Hill. "You sure?" "Yes, ma'am," Hill said, though the resentment in his voice was unmistakable. "All right," Ebony said quietly. "Carry on." She shot Kincaid a level look before walking away. When she returned to her office, Ebony closed the door and exhaled slowly. The tension in the air was thick, a sign that Kincaid had a way of provoking or belittling certain colleagues, especially African Americans. The question was, how far would he go? The next major incident came one Friday night. Ebony, having wrapped up some paperwork, prepared to leave around 8 p.m., but her phone buzzed with an alert, a reported robbery in progress near the intersection of Aramingo Avenue. She decided to respond, radioing in to dispatch that she was on her way. Upon arriving, she found the scene chaotic. A convenience store had been robbed, and a frantic clerk described 2 suspects who fled on foot. Officer Kincaid was already there, accompanied by 2 other officers. As Ebony approached, she saw that Kincaid had detained a black woman in her early 20s, pressing her against the hood of a squad car. "Let me go. I didn't do anything wrong," the woman cried. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Kincaid tightened his grip on the woman's wrists. "Stop resisting," he said coldly. Ebony stepped forward. "Officer Kincaid, what's going on?" He turned, his features taut. "She matches the suspect description," he said. Ebony eyed the woman. She had on a yellow sundress and sandals. She clutched a tote bag that spilled out a few books. Ebony turned to the store clerk, who stood shaking near the door. "Could you describe the robber again, sir?" Black male, tall, with a red hoodie," the clerk mumbled, adjusting his glasses. "He had a gun and demanded the cash. He ran out. I think a second person was waiting outside, but I was too scared to look. Maybe it was a woman. All I saw was the first one." Ebony turned to Kincaid, her tone measured. "The clerk says a tall black male with a red hoodie. This young lady does not look anything like that." "She could be the accomplice," Kincaid insisted, though Ebony heard doubt creeping into his voice. Ebony turned back to the clerk. "Is that her?" The clerk shook his head almost immediately. "No, she's not the right build," he paused. "I'm pretty sure it was a guy. She's too short." Ebony faced Kincaid, raising an eyebrow. Kincaid scowled but released the woman, who slumped, rubbing her bruised wrists, her eyes flooded with both relief and outrage. "What's your name, miss?" Ebony asked gently. Tanya Edwards. "I just came from studying at La Colombe Cafe. I was walking home. I saw the police lights and got stopped." Ebony nodded, gesturing for a paramedic to check Tanya's wrists. She shot Kincaid a stern look before quietly pulling him aside, speaking in a low voice. "You detained her with no probable cause. This will look terrible on your record if she files a complaint." "Why did you stop her?" Kincaid shrugged defensively. "She was acting suspicious, running away." Ebony shook her head. "Running or walking?" He hesitated. "Walking quickly, not the same as running. And she's wearing a yellow sundress. Hardly fits the description." Kincaid's eyes flickered with anger. "I had a hunch, that's all. We're looking for armed robbers. Better safe than sorry." "Not when it's about forcibly detaining innocent people." Ebony shot back, her voice tight. "Release her. Log the mistake in your incident report, and I expect a formal apology." Kincaid's lips curled with disdain. "Yes, Lieutenant," he spat, stalking off. That night, Ebony wrote a full memo documenting the incident. She didn't want to blow it out of proportion, but she also couldn't ignore it. The more she observed, the more convinced she became. Kincaid's prejudice was not merely theoretical. He acted on it, and if left unchecked, it could escalate. Over the next few weeks, Ebony's instincts told her that Kincaid was growing more hostile. They clashed on minor procedural issues in front of other officers. She noticed him glaring at her in the hallways, talking in hushed tones with like-minded colleagues. A sense of tension had begun to pervade the entire precinct, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for one of them to cross a line. Then, in a move that Ebony would later realize was carefully orchestrated, Kincaid found an opportunity to strike. It began with a tip-off about a supposed illegal gun shipment being funneled through a warehouse near the waterfront area. Ebony had been surveying for potential gang activity. Kincaid approached Ebony and Sergeant Lopez with excitement in his voice. "I've got a good lead," he said, brandishing a slip of paper with an address. "A source told me that a local gang is moving firearms there." Sergeant Lopez raised an eyebrow. "You trust this source?" "Yes. He's come through for me before," Kincaid insisted. "We can't let this slip by. If we move fast, we can bust them tonight." Ebony studied Kincaid's determined face. Her gut instinct told her to be cautious. He had never previously shared intelligence so readily with her. But the potential payoff, a major gun bust, was too important to ignore. She approved a small team to do reconnaissance first. She assigned Sergeant Lopez, Officer Samantha Briggs, and a couple of other trusted officers to scope out the warehouse. Kincaid volunteered to join them. Ebony decided to stay behind and monitor from dispatch, where she could coordinate if the situation escalated. Later that evening, Ebony sat in front of the array of monitors, listening to the radio chatter. The reconnaissance team arrived at the warehouse, lights off, the wind rustling through the weeds in the vacant lot. Minutes ticked by with nothing suspicious. Then Kincaid's voice came through, tense. "We've got movement inside. I see figures, about 3 or 4. They appear armed, requesting backup for immediate entry." Ebony frowned. She adjusted the camera feed from the surrounding area. Indeed, she spotted flickers of movement through a grimy window, but the video resolution wasn't clear enough to confirm anything. "Stand by," Ebony said into the mic. "Wait for the backup to arrive." "No time," Kincaid replied. The urgency in his voice heightened. "They're moving out. We have to go in now or lose them." Within seconds, Ebony heard the clatter of boots rushing inside. Shouts, echoes, the crackle of a taser. An adrenaline surge hit Ebony as she ordered more units to the scene. The next thing she heard was Kincaid's voice, triumphant, "Weapons secured. Officers, watch those suspects. They're resisting." The radio comms descended into jumbled static. When the dust settled, Kincaid reported they had found crates that contained guns, though Ebony's feed still showed only partial details. It was enough for Ebony to allow them to proceed with arrests. She sighed with relief. Maybe, just maybe, the intel was good, but that relief was short-lived. Hours later, as Ebony walked into the station's holding area to see the suspects, confusion hit her. The men arrested were unarmed at the time of apprehension, and the weapons discovered in crates were airsoft rifles, not real firearms. As Ebony continued investigating, glaring discrepancies emerged in the incident reports. Kincaid's narrative claimed that upon entry, the suspects drew guns. Other officers seemed confused, unable to confirm that detail. When Ebony reviewed the body cam footage from Kincaid's perspective, she found critical segments missing, footage that could have validated whether the suspects had indeed brandished real firearms. Kincaid attributed this to a technical glitch. Ebony's frustration grew. Then, at the very end of her shift, Ebony was called into the captain's office. There sat Kincaid, a cut on his brow, flanked by 2 union representatives. Kincaid's voice trembled with an uncharacteristic edge. He accused Ebony of failing to provide necessary backup in time, endangering the officers at the scene. "If it wasn't for my quick thinking," he told the captain, "we'd have lost those suspects. And who knows how many illegal weapons would have flooded our streets." Ebony stared at him. She recognized the manipulation instantly. Kincaid was trying to shift blame onto her, implying she was incompetent or, worse, that she deliberately withheld swift assistance. The captain, a stoic man named Captain Ferris, the current commanding officer, looked uneasy. He promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. In a final, twisted stroke, Kincaid claimed Ebony's hesitation was racially motivated, suggesting she was more interested in protecting criminals in a predominantly black neighborhood than supporting fellow officers. It was an accusation that left Ebony stunned and furious. The seeds were planted. By the time Ebony left that office, she knew exactly what had happened. Kincaid had orchestrated a staged bust, manipulated the scene, and then pinned the blame on her, all while weaponizing racial narratives. And it was working, at least in some corners of the department. Amid the swirling rumors, Ebony found unexpected support from Sergeant Andrew Lopez. He approached her quietly the next day, asking to speak in private. They retreated to a secluded conference room. Lopez, usually jovial, appeared grim. "Lieutenant," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I don't know if you can trust me, but I need to tell you something. I've seen Kincaid pull stunts like this before, not quite on this level, but close enough. Normally the brass sweeps it under the rug, but this time he's making you the fall person." Ebony's jaw tightened. I'm aware. I just need proof, she said. His story is shaky, but he's got union reps backing him up. He has more alliances here than I do, and let's be honest, I'm the newcomer, the one who was supposed to fix what's broken. That paints a target on my back. Lopez nodded. Exactly. But he made a mistake in that warehouse operation. I saw him slip away for a moment with a buddy who was outside. I suspect that's how the fake guns got planted. Ebony raised her brows. And you have evidence? Lopez hesitated. I might. My body cam was on for part of it. It's not conclusive, but it's something. I also overheard him discussing forging the timestamps on the footage he provided. He bragged that no one would believe a rookie lieutenant over him. Lopez grimaced. Those were his words, not mine. I know your rank is higher, but that's what he called you. Ebony's heart pounded. Lopez, if you have any of this on record, you need to share it with me. This is bigger than a personal feud. He's undermining the public trust, and it's about more than race, though that's huge in itself. It's about planting evidence, falsifying reports, and lying to the chain of command. The higher-ups can't ignore that if we have proof. I'll get it, Lopez promised. And for the record, Ebony, not everyone here is against you. Some of us want change. We need someone brave enough to stand up to Kincaid's old guard. He's tied to some heavy hitters in the union and maybe even outside the department. That's why no one's dared to cross him. But maybe you can break through that. Ebony pressed his shoulder gratefully. Thank you, Lopez. Be careful. That very day, Ebony received a phone call summoning her to City Hall. To her surprise, it came from one of the deputy commissioners. She arrived to find a meeting already in progress. The mood was solemn. The deputy commissioner, a wiry man named Darius Campbell, sat at the head of a polished oak conference table. To his left was Assistant Chief Raquel Montgomery, a respected figure in the department. Lieutenant Warner, thank you for coming, Deputy Commissioner Campbell said, gesturing for her to sit. We've read the preliminary incident report on that warehouse situation and the conflicting accounts from Officer Kincaid. We also have your memo about the convenience store incident. There's clearly tension in the 8th District. We'd like your perspective. Ebony recounted her story, choosing her words carefully but honestly. She explained the suspicious nature of Kincaid's tip, the mishandling of the operation, and the subsequent allegations he had hurled against her. She also mentioned the pattern of questionable behavior she had seen in him, though she lacked definitive evidence. She outlined the environment of subtle intimidation that younger officers felt. I have reason to believe that Officer Kincaid has manipulated evidence to frame suspects, and now me. He also demonstrates clear bias against black individuals. Assistant Chief Montgomery frowned. That's a serious accusation. Are you sure you can prove it? I'm working on it, Ebony said firmly, recalling Sergeant Lopez's promised footage. I'm gathering the documentation now. I just need time. Montgomery and Campbell exchanged glances. Then the deputy commissioner sighed. Lieutenant Warner, let's cut to the chase. Word travels fast in this department. We're aware that you are under consideration for a captain position, specifically to replace Captain Ferris when he rotates out in a few weeks. We assigned you to the 8th District to gauge your leadership in challenging circumstances. We're not at liberty to confirm details, but let's just say your performance here is a crucial test. Ebony's eyes widened slightly. So it was all official. The rumors about her potential promotion were true. She swallowed. I won't let you down, Montgomery nodded. We're prepared to back you, Ebony, but you need to handle this carefully. If Kincaid's behavior is indeed as egregious as you say, you must gather indisputable proof. The union won't allow us to remove him or discipline him on hearsay. Provide us a rock-solid case, and we'll support you fully. Ebony left that meeting more determined than ever. But she also felt the weight of new pressure. The entire department's leadership was watching her moves, evaluating her readiness for the captain's seat. Failure wasn't an option. As Ebony returned to her office, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single USB drive, unmarked. She carefully plugged it into her computer. The folder contained 2 video clips shot from different angles around the warehouse on the night of the supposed gun bust. One was a snippet from an outside security camera, likely from a nearby business, capturing the moment. Kincaid stepped out of the warehouse and rendezvoused with a man in a dark hoodie. The man handed Kincaid a crate, which Kincaid promptly carried inside. The second clip showed Kincaid setting down the crate in a corner behind some pallets. Moments later, the rest of the team burst into that same area, discovering the contraband. Ebony's heart pounded. This was the smoking gun, so to speak. Kincaid's ruse laid bare. She whispered under her breath, "Sergeant Lopez, is that you?" Immediately, she locked her door, made a copy of the clips to her secured departmental drive, and then stashed the USB in a safe place. She recognized the risk. If Kincaid found out she had this footage, he might escalate further. She needed to confirm its authenticity, compile it with official statements, and present it in an airtight manner. That evening, Ebony confronted Sergeant Lopez. He arrived in her office nervously, casting glances over his shoulder. "You got my package?" he asked quietly. "I did. This is huge, Andrew. Where did you get it?" Lopez exhaled. "A local business had a camera pointed at that alley. I convinced them to give me the footage before Kincaid or anyone else could get to it. I also clipped a portion from my own body cam, but it was risky he might notice. So I only gave you the crucial frames that show him carrying that crate. I'm risking my career to help you, Ebony." "You're doing the right thing," Ebony assured him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "But we have to be careful. If Kincaid realizes we have it, he'll try to destroy it or smear you. We need an official chain of custody plan." Lopez nodded, steeling himself. "I'm ready. Whenever you decide to act, I'll back you up." Over the next few days, Ebony quietly prepared her evidence, double-checking the video's timestamps, verifying the security camera's location, and gathering statements from officers who had conflicting recollections of the event. She worked late into the night, ignoring snide remarks from Kincaid, who would occasionally lurk in the hallway. She made sure to keep her superiors in the loop, providing them with the partial evidence she had verified. The deputy commissioner and assistant chief urged her to finalize everything, promising full departmental support once she presented a conclusive case. However, Kincaid wasn't idle. He noticed Ebony's sudden reticence and her late nights. Rumors of her secret investigation reached him. Sensing he might be cornered, Kincaid plotted a bold move. He would strike first with a more damning accusation that could force Ebony out of the department before she could reveal his misdeeds. Late one Friday afternoon, Ebony's phone buzzed frantically. It was Samantha Briggs. "Lieutenant, you need to get down to the riverfront parking lot near Market Street. There's a scene unfolding, and Kincaid's involved. Something about you came up on the scanner. Hurry!" With a sinking feeling, Ebony raced to the location. She found a cluster of patrol cars and a small crowd of onlookers. At the center stood Kincaid, face contorted in righteous indignation. Nearby, a battered teenage boy lay curled on the ground, cradling his arm, tears streaming down his cheeks. He was black, no older than 14 or 15, wearing a baseball jersey. "What happened?" Ebony demanded, pushing through the throng. She kneeled by the teenager, checking for injuries. The kid looked up at her, eyes wide with fear and relief. Officer Kincaid announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. This kid was dealing drugs. When I approached, he took off running. I chased him. He pulled a knife. See, it's right here. Kincaid kicked a blade toward the pavement. The boy sobbed, "That's not mine. I swear." He threw it at me. I didn't have any weapon. I just panicked and ran because I was scared. Kincaid gave Ebony a baleful stare. "You want to lecture me on probable cause and due process? Well, there it is. The boy's got a weapon." He leaned closer, adding in a lower tone, "Just like you coddled that woman at the convenience store. You'll probably coddle him. You never back your own officers, do you?" The situation was tense. Bystanders shouted that the boy was innocent, that they saw Kincaid drop the knife. Others contradicted them, unsure of what they witnessed. Ebony pressed her lips together, scanning the scene, the boy's wide, terrified eyes. The suspiciously clean knife lying on the ground far from his reach, and Kincaid's triumphant posture. This stank of a setup, once again. Calmly, Ebony directed other officers to secure the scene, gather witness statements, and check any nearby security cameras. She assisted the paramedics in tending to the boy, ignoring Kincaid's heated glare. The crowd eventually dispersed, but Ebony lingered, speaking softly with the boy's mother when she arrived. Ebony promised a thorough investigation, refusing to let the matter be quietly swept aside. The next day, Ebony marched into the station, clutching a thick folder of documentation. It was time to blow the whistle on Kincaid. She had the video evidence from the warehouse, testimonies about his discriminatory stops, and now a blossoming scenario of a planted weapon against a frightened teenage boy. Ebony was determined to ensure that not only was Kincaid exposed, but also that the boy's name was cleared. She had arranged a meeting with the Deputy Commissioner and Assistant Chief Montgomery. Captain Ferris would be present too, though Ebony suspected Ferris might feel conflicted about disciplining an officer under his watch. When Ebony arrived at the conference room, she saw that Kincaid was already there, flanked by two union representatives. A swirl of dread and resolve filled her chest as she took her seat at the opposite end. Montgomery and Campbell presided with stern expressions. Captain Ferris, arms folded, hovered near the window. Montgomery began, "We're here to address serious allegations from both sides. Officer Kincaid, you've alleged Lieutenant Warner's negligence in the warehouse raid, as well as possible misconduct. Lieutenant Warner, you've documented potential evidence of Officer Kincaid's misconduct, including false arrests and planted evidence. Let's proceed." Kincaid launched into a carefully rehearsed speech, painting Ebony as an inexperienced, biased lieutenant, accusing her of favoritism towards certain suspects, of interfering with legitimate policing, and of orchestrating a personal vendetta to ruin his name. He even had a prepared statement from a reluctant officer, someone Ebony barely knew, who claimed Ebony once told them to go easy on minority suspects. Ebony's stomach churned, wondering how deep Kincaid's manipulations ran. She saw the union reps nodding along, as if the case were open and shut. When it was Ebony's turn, she calmly presented her folder. She began with the convenience store incident body cam footage, revealing how Kincaid had forcibly detained a woman who clearly didn't match the suspect's description. She moved on to statements from Officer Samantha Briggs, Sergeant Lopez, and others who had witnessed Kincaid's intimidation tactics. Then she played the warehouse video. First, the snippet from the security camera showing Kincaid carrying in the crate. Then a short clip from an unguarded angle, capturing Kincaid, placing the crate where officers would soon discover it. A weighted silence settled on the room. Kincaid's face turned pale, his eyes darting from the screen to the union reps. Ebony continued, "This footage clearly contradicts Officer Kincaid's official report. The crate did not originate from within the warehouse. Kincaid brought it in from outside, presumably with the help of an accomplice. The weapons inside turned out to be non-lethal airsoft guns, so we have a staged bust." Ebony took a deep breath. This is beyond unprofessional. It's criminal, and it's not the first time. I can provide additional instances of him planting or falsifying evidence. Kincaid opened his mouth to retaliate, but Ebony pressed forward. She described the teenage boy from the previous day, the suspicious knife with no fingerprints, the contradicting witness accounts who saw Kincaid throw something. While Ebony didn't yet have direct footage of that scene, the glaring parallels to the warehouse hoax were impossible to ignore. Assistant Chief Montgomery shut off the monitor, expression grim. "Officer Kincaid, do you have an explanation for this video?" Kincaid stammered. I don't know where that footage came from. It's out of context, could be doctored. My union reps will request a forensic analysis. "This is a smear job," Deputy Commissioner Campbell interjected. "I've already had our department authenticate the video. It's real. The timestamps match up with the official timeline. We also have witness statements from multiple officers." This is extremely serious. Captain Ferris, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "Officer Kincaid, given the evidence, I have no choice but to suspend you pending an internal affairs investigation." His voice shook with barely contained anger. "We do not tolerate this kind of conduct." The union reps tried to protest, but the facts were overwhelming. Kincaid's face contorted in rage, and he spat out the words that had been burning inside him for weeks. "This is what happens when you let unqualified people waltz in and run things. She's only here because the department needs to fill a quota. She set me up so she could be captain." The venom in his tone made Ebony's blood boil, but she held steady. Montgomery silenced him with a glare. "That's enough, Officer Kincaid. There is no room in this department for that kind of talk, especially not with the evidence we have. You will be escorted out of the building immediately." And so, the avalanche of consequences began. Kincaid, once so confident in his ability to manipulate the system, found himself at the mercy of that same system he had exploited for so long. In the weeks that followed, an internal affairs investigation delved into Kincaid's entire career history. Old complaints resurfaced, fresh ones emerged. Some individuals who had been silent about Kincaid's behavior over the years finally spoke up, emboldened by Ebony's evidence. It became clear that Kincaid's father's legacy had protected him unofficial pacts, hush-hush favors, and overlooked indiscretions. But that shield was crumbling swiftly. Ebony, meanwhile, worked to heal the damage he had caused. She reached out personally to Tanya Edwards, the young woman wrongly detained outside the convenience store, ensuring her complaint was taken seriously. She coordinated with youth advocates to support the teenage boy battered by Kincaid. She ordered retraining for officers who had been swayed by Kincaid's approach. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, both within the precinct and out in the community. Sergeant Lopez, Officer Samantha Briggs, and others who had cooperated in exposing Kincaid found themselves targeted by his remaining allies in the Union. Subtle threats and social slights were made. Ebony, wielding her new influence and the backing of the departmental leadership, made sure they were protected. She rewarded them with better shifts and recognition for their integrity. Though not every officer welcomed the shift in culture, Ebony's determined leadership and official mandate from City Hall gave her the authority to push reforms forward. Eventually, the internal affairs recommendation was clear. Kincaid would be fired and turned over to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. A hush fell over the 8th District when the news broke. Some officers, those close to Kincaid, resigned in protest or threatened to. But Ebony had no regrets. She only felt relief that the internal rot was finally being removed. 2 months later, Ebony received an official letter from the Deputy Commissioner's office. She was being promoted to captain and assigned full command of the 8th District, effective immediately. The ceremony was understated due to ongoing social tensions, but Ebony's father would have been proud. She stood in her crisp uniform, pinned with a new badge, her heart swelling with gratitude and a sense of the heavy responsibilities ahead. At the press conference announcing her promotion, Ebony spoke earnestly about bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. She didn't mince words about the department's historical shortcomings, nor did she promise quick fixes. Instead, she pledged honesty, accountability, and a willingness to listen. Her speech was well received, and for once, the public narrative centered on a positive step forward. Kincaid, meanwhile, faced the hard karma he had invited upon himself. Unemployed and disgraced, he found no support from the union. He had relied on the union leaders, quickly distanced themselves from him once the evidence was made public. Worse, he was under criminal investigation for multiple counts of tampering with evidence and making false statements. In a cruel twist of fate, he discovered that many of his longtime allies had no intention of sacrificing their own careers for him. He was alone. The city he once patrolled with a smug sense of superiority now viewed him as a pariah. Weeks turned into months. The 8th District started a series of community-building projects, everything from hosting youth outreach programs to fostering open dialogues on policing tactics. Body cam footage rules were tightened. Officers underwent bias awareness training. Ebony's direct style ruffled feathers here and there, but more often than not, her integrity won people over. One sunny afternoon, Ebony stepped out of her new office, formerly Captain Ferris's space, to greet a group of local community leaders. They toured the precinct to see how changes were unfolding. Ebony's assistant hustled to keep pace with the enthusiastic visitors. Voices filled the corridors with a sense of hope that had long been absent. Sergeant Lopez walked beside Ebony, beaming with pride. "We still have a ways to go, but we're making progress," he commented. Ebony nodded. "Definitely. But at least now, people know they can trust us. That's half the battle won." Down the hall, Officer Samantha Briggs guided a group of high school kids, giving them a behind-the-scenes look at police work, emphasizing empathy and responsibility. The kids seemed fascinated, chattering about what they'd learned. A phone call from the deputy commissioner interrupted Ebony's reverie. Stepping aside, she heard the official's warm congratulations for her transition to captain. "We are proud of you, Captain Warner," he said. "Keep it up. The city needs leaders like you." Ebony hung up, gazing through a nearby window at the bustling street. The city's skyline, a blend of old buildings and modern skyscrapers, shimmered in the midday sun. She thought of her father, how he used to look out over those same streets, always telling her, "Be the change you want to see." Ebony had held on to that dream, and here she stood, a living testament to perseverance, justice, and the power of doing what's right. As she turned back to rejoin the visitors, Ebony felt an unshakable resolve to continue pushing for reforms. Because for every Kincaid out there, the system needed an Ebony Warner, someone unafraid to shine a light into the darkest corners, someone who understood that a badge was not a license to discriminate, but a vow to protect and serve all equally. Thank you for watching this tale of resilience, justice, and the power of truth. Ebony Warner's journey from a determined lieutenant to the new captain of her precinct shows us that standing against discrimination is never easy, but it's vital for progress. Her unyielding commitment to exposing wrongdoers, even within her own department, reminds us that integrity ultimately outshines prejudice. Kincaid's downfall was a direct result of the cruelty he sowed and the lies he told hard. Karma delivered swift and sharp. If this story resonated with you, if you cheered for Ebony's triumph, help share her message far and wide. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and share this video with your friends and family. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, prevailing over injustice, subscribe to the channel. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you for being part of this story.